So today this is sidetracking from my usual topic, which is pretty much all things self-storage otherwise. But I've been on a couple podcasts recently where people have actually asked me about my background, and a lot of questions were centered around private lending. And I've actually had a lot of people request that I basically give some tips on what I've done for personal lending in the past. Twin Oaks Capital right now, currently we are primarily almost all in on self-storage development and services to self-storage. But we do still do some private lendings from time to time, whether it's on self-storage or other deals as well. And so this is actually on a topic that I discussed 2 years ago for a blog post for Bigger Pockets. But I'm going to have a three-part series in today's part one. And today we're going to just basically discuss about the four biggest mistakes to make when really just initially getting started out and making that first deal that you might be doing, or even maybe your second or third for private lending. So step number one, do not ever lend money that you might need. Oftentimes I have it where somebody tells me I got $150,000 I have sitting in my bank account and I want to lend $150,000. You want to treat lending as something that you can potentially lose all your money, because most of the time I've dealt with lending and depending on when I've lost it, it's pretty much been all or money, all or none. You're either going to get all your money back, or you're going to get none of it back, or you're going to be going to court to fight for it. And the reason why I say this is because I've had instances before where I talked with somebody and they said, I'm going to need the money for 3 months. I'm like, great. Well, month 3 doesn't come. And it's like, well, great. I need it back by this date because I was planning to close on X property by this point in time. And eventually in one of those cases, I actually did not get the money back by the timeline I needed it by. They were 3 months behind. And then what happened was I actually had to go out and borrow money for more expensive than I was actually lending it on. So that's the biggest step. Only lend money that you're fully willing to lose. If you're not willing to lose it, don't lend it. Step number 2, do not lend your money too cheap. So going back to that example, okay, I lent money out and then I thought, like, oh, they'll be really fast. It'll be a quick return, make some decent money. 7% is decent. Well, the market rose during that period of time, so 7% wasn't even that bad of a rate by the end. I basically could have gotten a similar rate with mortgage. And secondly, I had to go out and borrow it for more. So I want to lend it out at a worst case later on. If I had to borrow it and do something else for it, it's worth my time. The other thing about it is if you lend your money out too cheap, you also have to worry about all the people that are going to reach out to you. I can't tell you how often that people will come to me and say, hey, I want to do this deal at 1.7%. And then later on, like, I've had 25 conversations with them. And so it's like, okay, so 1 point, that's 1% of $100,000. I made $1,000 up front. And then let's just say I do 12%. So basically 1% a month on top of that. They borrow it, I lend it to them for another month at 1%. So I basically made $2,000, but if it took me 6-7 conversations with it, then I'm basically just trading time for money, right? So the biggest thing is that when you lend money, you also got to factor in the amount of time that you spend just to lend the money, whether that's underwriting the deal or looking at the deal or whatnot. I personally like to be most expensive guy around, because when I'm the most expensive guy around, everybody comes to me last. And so now I know then if they're coming to me, that I'm going to be the one lending to them, because I don't want people to think I'm the cheapest. I'd rather have everybody shop around and come to me kind of as their last resort, or their first resort if we've done business multiple times. They know I'm just going to be quick and easy. Number 3, only lend on deals you would foreclose on and can foreclose on easily. The biggest thing with this is that you have to lend on deals, in my opinion, when you're first starting out, always in first lien position. Now, that can be difficult because when you lend in second lien position, you can lend $20,000 for rehab or $40,000 for rehab. But then essentially what happens is you do these micro loans, but then you don't know if they're going to use that money for that property unless you try and make them do construction draws, which makes even more of a time waste. Or essentially then you have to foreclose on it, but then you got to work with like a big bank like Bank of America to try to get them to basically allow you to basically foreclose on it when they want to protect their interests. That's not going to happen. So I always lend on a first lien, and I always lend on properties that I want to take. A few years back, I lent on a deal where the person I lent to, they knew what they were doing. They had the ability to execute, but the problem though is that they were trying to get 15 deals at the same time. They expanded too fast. I had only lent on one deal to them, and they had some other lenders that they worked with that had 5 or 6 deals ongoing. So basically, when push came to shove, they chose to default on my loan first because they wanted to preserve the relationships with the others. And then on top of that, the other people too as well, they had heftier penalties on it too as well. So ultimately, this property, if I were to foreclose on it, it was 3 hours away. I had no like network there, and I didn't want to foreclose on it, and they knew that. So I literally had to let it go months beyond what I wanted to because they knew I wasn't going to foreclose on it. And then finally, once I did finally start to foreclose on it, did I finally get paid. But it was the biggest hassle ever because they knew I didn't want the property back because they knew I couldn't make money off of doing that. So I want a property. If I lend to you, that's generally a good sign that I like the property myself because I will 100% close you don't pay me. Because then what I'll do is I'll take that property, I'll call one of my contractors, I'll call somebody else that does flip and say, hey, listen, you want to do a deal with this? Like, I want to make this amount of money back off it plus the interest I have into it. You can keep this amount of equity to it, and then I just pass it off so I can still keep the passive nature of the investment. And number 4, do not wheel and deal. Do not negotiate with anybody because the second you start negotiating with people, they're going to start giving you scenarios like, well, what if I did this? What if I did this? And before you know it, you're going to be spending so much time talking about what it's going to take for to get a deal, and they're not going to respect what you say. So I just tell everybody it's 3 points, 15% interest. Then later on, if I decide once I've done a few deals with them that they are going to be easy to work with, I might change that. But the second you start wheeling and dealing and negotiating back and forth with people, the second you're setting yourself up where you're trading time for money. The whole reason why you're lending is because you want to be passive. So if you're constantly wheeling and dealing people, it's not passive. So that's it for today. Be ready for step 2 next Wednesday.